All right, I'll call this meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the South Burlington School Board meeting. Our first agenda item is any comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any comments? Yes, can you identify yourself, please?
My name is Sandy Flemmer, and my kids go to Orchard and to Tuttle Middle School, and I'm here to speak about, we just found out the last week or so that there's a proposal to move the 5th grade to the middle school. And I really feel that 5th graders should not be moved to the middle school because it will force them to grow up emotionally and socially before they need to. Moving 5th graders to the middle school goes way beyond any possible academic benefits. I'm concerned with placing 10-year-olds with children that are in 7th and 8th grade. And they're in a pubescent level of development, and 5th graders have not hit that developmental stage yet. I am concerned over placing 10-year-olds on the bus with high schoolers and middle schoolers. I'm concerned with, we spent a lot of energy at Orchard and the other schools trying to fight the methadone clinic being right next door, and it really concerns me that now we're putting 5th graders in a situation that our other kids aren't even allowed to walk down or run down the street, yet we're going to put our kids right next to a methadone clinic. And if there is a hope to have a playground, the playground would be right in the backyard of the methadone clinic, and to me that is just not acceptable. A big thing, no recess. It's still very developmentally appropriate for our 5th graders to have recess. And I worry that, again, by pushing them into a junior high level of education, that we're going to be taking away that much needed outside play that they do need, and that our middle schoolers still need and get very little of. I'm also concerned with putting children in situations where they are dealing with older children and issues that they are not developmentally ready to deal with. Society is rushing children into adolescence with technology and media, and I feel that as parents we're trying really hard to hold our kids back, and this is another way that we're going to be pushing kids into cell phones and texting and Facebook and all of that. And finally, as parents, it's very upsetting to hear that this is a done deal from administration and teachers. That really is the word, and out on the street. And just after going through the Calendar 2.0 process, again, it just feels that as parents, we are part of this community, and we deserve a say in something that not only directly affects our children, but has tax implications as well. There's talk about our kids being able to access foreign language. Well, we're going to have to hire foreign language teachers. That has a tax implication. If we're going to be talking about potentially closing schools or adding on, that all has tax implications, which will affect our property taxes. And I just think that I respect the view that you're the school board and you're the superintendent, but I feel like this is a really big decision that really needs buy-in from the community, because if you want this to be successful, it has to feel comfortable, and hearing that this year's 3rd graders are going to be put into that situation is not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Jerry.
Are we taking comments now with regard to the school budget, or is that a different time?
We have the budget on the agenda
So I
coming
should
up.
wait?
So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes. Can you identify yourself?
Sure. My name is Megan Sweet. I'm also an Orchard parent, and I'm not sure if there's an opportunity for a question to be answered, but I'm looking for a little clarification on the proposal to move the 5th grade, and particularly with a committee being formed. And I'm just curious, is the purpose of the committee to have input into decision making, or is the purpose of the committee to look at how to best implement a decision that's already been made?
Do you want to respond to that?
Sure. So again, I appreciate people coming out. you know, anytime there's a new, for somebody, let me just start by this, if I could. Anytime there's a new proposal or a new initiative, it's hard to get the word out in what I would say, all at once. And so what I've been doing is working hard with the administrators that they're informed and part of, and then beginning the next phase. Currently, I've been working hard, and I think we have most of the PTO meetings scheduled, and so that is the next step, just as I did with the staff and teachers. As you know, if it was to parents first and not staff and teachers, that would be problematic. So that is being planned. Your specific question around committees, and again, having a committee isn't, you know, just to have a committee. It really is to look at additional opportunities within the move, as well as concerns and questions, and how we can work to resolve those, or identify them, resolve them for the betterment of children. And so that will be part of the conversation that I'll be having with, you know, parents and community members across the board, to identify those and really come up with what I think is going to be a positive outcome for kids. I know it's highly charged. We certainly had some staff meetings and teacher meetings that were that way, and the principals are in the room tonight with this meeting. But I think in the end, I do want people to trust we have an ultimate care for our children. I do, the administrators do, the school board does, and I want to ensure that we don't jeopardize any part of their education, but only enhance it. And so I absolutely understand the fears. This wouldn't really be the right forum to start, but I'm glad you came. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm looking forward to folks coming forward to help through a committee process, which we'll have out to folks very soon, around how voices can be heard and solutions can be rendered.
So it's a done deal, though, so it's happening?
It is going to happen. And again, part of the decision that I made, again, the board evaluates me, my decision, and I feel that we could wander around decision-making for a long, long time. And so I have made the decision at the present time to move forward with fifth grade coming here, but doing so in a way that allows for opportunities and collaboration and identified concerns to make sure that it's a positive transition. I've done it in a manner that allows us that time to really allow committees and folks to really work with me to do that. So.
Yes.
My name is Beth Ross, and I also have a child at Orchard. And I appreciate your words, and I have to say that really all it does is fire me up even more. And I think there is going to be a lot of heat from parents, and I think a lot of explaining that, not like what's going to happen in the future, but how this decision has been come to in a really very solid way, because we love the way things go at Orchard. I mean, truly, it is a gem. I moved here 2 years ago from Oregon, and I moved to Orchard for Orchard. And the fact that it might change is a huge blow that I do not understand at all. Mm-hmm. And I can just tell you that there's so many people are going to be so angry, and I know that you might have our kids' best interests, but we do too. Yes. And there is a huge community of people who have so much background in education. I mean, they might be parents, but they're teachers. They used to be teachers. They used to be counselors, and they don't support this at all. And so I feel like a lot needs to be said to the parents, the taxpayers, the people who move here, the people who want to stay here, in order to support this proposal. And the fact that it's already been done is very upsetting. So
let me, if I can.
Yes.
So I know that there's a lot of emotion, and I care a lot about that. That's the most important thing a community can have, is we have our community, our parents behind our children, most important. And I would only ask that you, at this moment, and I know you have a question mark, give me the opportunity to connect with parent and teacher groups and anyone who wants to meet with me. Allow me the opportunity to connect with folks and to hear about how the decision came to be, and why the ideas, and what are the opportunities, and talk more about the transition. And I would simply just say that, I'm willing to come, I'm willing to meet. I want it right for kids, and there's good reason from my perspective. around this. So it's hard because I'm not answering all your questions. But I just ask that you say, I'm open and I'm willing to come to small meetings and large. I'm committed to that because I know that some people are going to be more apt to respond in that way. So I just ask that at this moment you give me the opportunity and work collaboratively to get folks to come to meetings or to schedule that so we can have an honest conversation. I do care deeply about our kids, first and foremost, and I do this through that lens.
And we will have updates on future board agendas as well, so look on the website for those. Okay. Good, thank you. All right, any amendments to the agenda, David?
No.
Okay. Move on to the city-school collaboration.
I don't have a lot to add to that. Again, Elizabeth and I haven't had the opportunity to meet with Pam and Kevin. That one was
Couple weeks,
was postponed, and I think I already reported on that once.
Yep.
But I do have another meeting coming up with the city folks and myself around the master planning work between the city and school. So that's happening on this Friday, and again, I'll be updating the board following that as well.
Great. And on agenda item 6, an update on the methadone clinic, Howard Center's permit.
So again, our appeal continues to be in front of the Supreme Court. We're awaiting kind of a scheduling and response. I know that in addition, there's some other conversations around our safety overlays, although not specifically related to the methadone clinic, but all in part around safety and security for our children. And I know that there was a meeting that last night actually where some of that discussion happened. And so the school board continues to look at ways in which we can ensure safety zones in and around our schools as the new land development regulations come to be.
And Martin, do you want to give a quick update on the Planning Commission meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yesterday, the Planning Commission considered the school board's proposal for safety zone around the schools, including the a zone that would really encompass Central School, the high school, and middle school. And one of the primary reasons we're pushing for having this done, first of all, it was initiated in part because of the methadone clinic moving nearby, and the fact that that could happen without any consideration of safety. But then there's a form-based code move which in the city which will amend or actually replace certain zoning regulations. And for the area that the form-based code covers, no uses are prohibited. And that was certainly of concern for us because currently, under the current zoning, there are certain uses that are prohibited. Unfortunately, not medical offices that dispense Schedule 1 and 2 drugs, like the methadone clinic, but other uses are. So we really want the Planning Commission, the City Council, to at the same time that they're enacting the form-based code, to make sure that the schools are protected by having a safety overlay. Unfortunately, the Planning Commission has essentially put our proposal on hold for 2 reasons, which I think are incorrect. One of which is waiting for the outcome of our current Supreme Court, our current appeal to the Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, regarding the zoning decision to allow the methadone clinic to be in its location in the first place. We believe that that appeal has nothing to do with what we're asking for with the safety zone. That appeal specifically is asking the Supreme Court to instruct the city of South Burlington that they can and should look at safety concerns. We don't want the Supreme Court, it's not going to be looking at the safety concerns itself. In any event, the other purpose was to wait for a form-based code for that to run its course. And our concern is we do not want to see the form-based code go into effect and essentially any use could then occur until the safety zone, if it's several months down the road. A specific concern, frankly, is that the current methadone clinic, which would be grandfathered, but if the form-based code goes into effect without our school safety overlay, the methadone clinic would be able to expand because that use would not be limited in any manner. And currently there may be limitations. There may be offices along San Remo Road that are not zoned for medical use, that once the form-based code is put into effect, that won't be relevant. So that does concern us. I mean, we're trying to learn, we're still fighting the fact that the methadone clinic is there, but at the same time, we're trying to learn to live with the methadone clinic as we understand that it will be. But we don't like the idea that it could expand without any kind of limitation. So in any event, that's where we are with that. And we're going to continue to push the City Council and Planning Commission to try to make sure that they're not leaving the schools exposed once the form-based code gets enacted. So.
Thanks for that brief update.
Yes, sorry. I could have gone on for another 15, 20 minutes, really.
Transferring my
It was brief.
lack of brevity to next door.
All right, we'll move on to Agenda 7. I know many of you are here to get to the budget discussion, and this is a good segue into that. The use of the remaining 2006 bond funds for capital projects.
So I'm going to kick it off, and then John, actually, Elizabeth, we're going to have to turn so you can see a little bit more about it. But actually, this is really the 2005-2006 bond. It's actually titled 5. So I just want to make a correction. That's actually what it was there. And in the initial, just so again, I know the board's aware of this initial bond was for the purposes of an administrative building that had some special ed applications, a separate standalone building, and upgrades to the cafeteria at the high school. As a result of not being eligible for state aid, it did not go forward, and as a result, the bond was actually passed. However, we didn't use it, and so it's been in a fund that basically pays for itself. And so this proposal in our budget, and we're going to talk more about it when we come to the budget, but it's a player in the budget about the utilization of that particular bond for very specific reasons. So without further ado, John's here to just give the board a little bit more specific insight about the bond.
This would be Article 2 at the election in March. First Tuesday in March. Article 1 is to vote on the amount of our budget, and this is authority to use unexpended proceeds from the 2005 bond for school improvements. So the idea today is to look at the wording. Next Wednesday's meeting will be to finalize the wording, and the board would approve it there to go to on the ballot. So this basically says what David talked about in 2005. Voters authorized the district to have bonded indebtedness to finance construction of additional classrooms and administrative space. That didn't happen. The projects were expected to be eligible for state school construction aid, which would have offset a portion of the costs. The projects were not undertaken, and the bond proceeds have been invested in earnings to pay off the debt on those bonds, has done that faithfully for the last 7 years. And it's last year's budget book on page 11 shows 2005 bonds, and it says paid for by bond proceeds. So we've had it in the budget, but it hasn't been part of. Didn't add. The net was zero to the taxpayers at that point. The second part of this, the warning, to use the outstanding bond principal of $1,675,000 to finance the construction of capital improvements to the middle school, the high school, and Chamberlain School in the amount of $1,675,000. Shall the voters approve the use of the unexpended principal from the South Burlington 2005 Series 1 GEO improvement bonds in that amount to finance capital improvements to Frederick Tuttle Middle School, South Burlington High School, and Chamberlain School? I'm kind of jumping through that, but that's what the warning would be. The ballot item at this point, now these are drafts, so if we have suggestions, the attorney Bob Fletcher will be here next week, and the ballot item is coming up here.
While that's coming up, I do think it's important. that one of the things I think people need to be aware of is that now probably in its 7th year has been a stewardship plan, specifically focusing on related facility and major items. And this is, on boilers, on air handlers, on roofs, things of that nature. And so we've done a better job, or I would say a good job, to identify those and identify the kind of the useful life of those. And that has been in play for us for a long time. We also are able to go out in years future to know what those costs are. This particular use of the bond obviously is paying attention to the stewardship plan, but also paying attention to some newly required ADA compliant issues, which we know are important and need to be addressed. And, particularly one major one, or two really major ones, are elevator upgrades at both the high school primarily, and our elevators and bathrooms access around ADA compliant. So those are very specific, higher dollar items that we believe that the bond will significantly help, again, adhere to a component of that plan.
So this is what would be actually on the ballot. Shall the voters approve use of unexpended principal from the South Burlington School District 2005 Series 1 General Obligation Improvement Bond in the amount of $1,675,000 to finance capital improvements to Frederick Tuttle Middle School, South Burlington High School, and Chamberlain School? So we need to consider, is that tell the story? Is there enough detail there? And for people who haven't seen this before, I want to go, David was just talking about what's in the bond. On pages, in the budget handout that it's there, 9 to 13 describes the whole project and the process. So you have that. And then this is a little bit more detail, and we're fine-tuning the amounts, the estimates. The middle school elevator here, we have one elevator that's not up to code and with no backup to go to this first and second, between the first and second floor. When that went down last April, we had to reschedule programming for at least many classes on the first floor. And so we need to address that issue. The high school elevator is, the high school's 52 years old, and it's the original elevator. It goes up between 5 levels and it's in need of repair and replacement. High school bathrooms, on the first floor, we would remodel and upgrade to Americans with Disability Act standards. And this is a pretty solid estimate to do all the bathrooms on the first floor. We have 2 roofs here that need to be done from our stewardship plan. One is at the high school above the art wing. It's the south wing. It's 2 sections of roof. And at Chamberlain School, there's a roof above the library and soffit around there that needs to be refurbished. And finally, one area of our stewardship plan that we've deferred for a number of years is the replacement of windows at the high school. So we would do the north and west sides of the building at $192,000, and that would essentially be half of the building. And finally, there's contingent costs in here also. So that's where the $1.6 million would go.
John, do we know the length of the term of these bonds? And do we know the expected lifetime of these replacements and upgrades?
Yes, we do. The bond was issued in 2000. It was actually issued in early 2006, but it was all approved in 2005. So that's 8 years in. So we have 12 years left. The elevators will go 40 years. And the roofs, the high school roof would be a 30-year roof, and the Chamberlain roof would be 15. The windows would be 20 or more. These are all or more because, and I missed one, I think. The bathrooms. We have the original bathrooms going now at 50 years. So it's reasonable to expect they'd last 20 years. So the improvements themselves would outlast the investment.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
So any discussion on the repurposing of the 2005-6 bond?
I just have a question. I mean, can there be more detail in the warning, or is that pretty common, that level of generality? Should there be any mention of that's in part for ADA compliance of buildings? I know that's not the only thing, but
We
I-
could be a little bit more specific
In the detail, usually in the
in the
tax book?
detail.
Isn't it usually in the tax book?
It is. Too,
yeah, it would
yes.
be in the tax book. But I mean, if
We can ask.
somebody looks the first time they see this is when they go to vote and they
Yeah, my
see
perception
that.
is these ballot things are pretty concise, but
Right.
I don't have any
Can
objection
certainly
to
ask
them
whether or
being
not ADA
expanded.
compliant,
Okay.
you know, projects. It's not 100% true all. I mean, bathrooms, elevators, yes. You know, roofs, no. So, you know, we'd have to be clear and not inconsistent with where the dollars would be.
I think the key is, yes, the voters approved this money many years ago, but not for the purposes
That it's
that we
intended.
need to use it for now. We want to use it for now. And that approval is critical, so.
So John, in the case where we don't have firm estimates, what happens if we're way off?
Well, the one place that's, we had a 2-month study on the elevator here, so that's very firm, the 395.
Right.
The elevator to high school is not as firm. Since the last time we discussed this, we talked to 2 architects, one who did the ADA study and one who did the specs for the middle school. Without saying, I basically asked, is that enough money?
Mm-hmm.
And both said, yes, it's actually more than enough.
Okay.
And, you know, we don't have that study done, so I know that if the, let's see, if it costs more, and it would go to those other projects, I mean, that's what yes.
I think ADA would obviously, and that's what John just said, would take priority. We have some contingent money in there which he identified. We have to be careful not having too much. It doesn't bode well if we have way too much. But it would be done in that kind of priority. And obviously, by the time we begin the project, we'll have much more, we'll have, you know, more solid numbers, particularly the high school elevator.
And we've got an action item on the proposed 2015 budget in our, this agenda item number 9. Can the board adopt a budget without having had the motion to approve Article 2 on the ballot?
Yes. According to the attorney, what people are voting on is the total amount of the budget, the 42 million, or 44,372,000. So that wouldn't change. If the board decides next week not to go with the bond, or the voters say no, what would happen is the funds would go to repair those 2 roofs that would have been used
In the
for the
normal
debt
capital
service.
plan?
Yes.
And we'd continue to pay the debt service on the bond?
Yes, from bond proceeds that wouldn't go to the taxpayers.
If we didn't have this bond, if the voters hadn't approved this in the 2005 timeframe, how would we be managing the becoming ADA compliant based on the audit?
We would have to prioritize all the findings in the ADA audit, get estimates, and come to the board and voters with a bond issue that would take care of those specific items.
And it would have to be a bond?
Well,
That would be
yes.
the preferred way to find it.
The way, in the past 5 or 6 years, we've been able to fund our stewardship plan through the operating budget. But the way the state, our situation is, that's not practical for instance, the $395 for this elevator would be 2 cents on the tax rate this year if we had done it through the operating budget.
So again, it does allow us to use, or repurposing, reusing, and telling the story about a bond that was once targeted for improvements. And so, again, that is the desire, and I think, for us, it's trying to create some organized way to stay on top of taking care of our facilities. And, our stewardship plan has been one that's been very helpful. We've reorganized it on a number of occasions, and, the principals that are in the room certainly know that we've deferred certain things, but we haven't forgot about them, or they haven't been a surprise to us. And that's, again, we're still in the process, always with older buildings, to identify those things that might not be working, and should we have those on or not. And so I don't think we're 100% perfect on our list of the contained items in the stewardship plan, but I feel like we're in much, much better shape than we were, for sure.
And the needs that were addressed in the original bond, John or David, those weren't funded because the state aid was not available. That's my understanding. The state aid was not available after the bond was approved by the voters.
Yes, that's my understanding too.
But those, can you give an update on what happened with those projects?
When, again, I can't I wasn't here for all of the beginnings of that, but the specific space for special education and alternative programming, obviously we've embedded in some different places and in some cases outplaced to meet the needs of the students. And the high school, we've basically done what I'm going to say some patchwork. We've done some modifications internally, low-cost internal pieces with the division of CAF 1. But again, we've made no real major change, to accommodate the identified need. And I say major change. We've made some small changes to accommodate the need.
David, is that the same bond that included the central school parking lot and the security updates to?
That was the 1995 bond.
Okay.
And that was done back in, again, 1995, and that was with specific purposes to add spaces at the 3 elementary schools, project rooms. It did not do anything to the high school or middle school schools at that time. So that was 95, 96 that happened.
I remember with that one, I just didn't remember the year, but there was some leafleting that was done to get the word out as to what the projects were, and we might consider that as a way to,
communicate.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think the other thing, and you've already seen this in your budget information around the bonds, the current bonds, and the 1995 bond is in there, and you see where that one is becoming mature, and how that happens. So anyway.
Any questions from the public on the bond? Yes, Lisa.
Just to be simple and clear, this is money that the taxpayers have already approved. Because the projects never happened, you just need to go ask them to reapprove the bond in light of these ADA things and other things, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of impact to the taxes and the tax rate,
there's no net effect.
there's no impact.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that needs to be made.
It's a repurposing of the bond. Well, John answered that question.
We include the bond issue debt service in the budget.
Right.
We have decreased the number and the amount of projects that we are doing through regular operating budget, so that it's neutral.
It's neutral. Okay, I think that's the message, and, when you spin this and market it, that it's.
We do have to be really clear, because we cannot be deceptive. I mean, there was very specific reasons back then.
Right.
And we need to be very clear and very specific, about the repurposing. So some people would say, well, why can't you just go out and use it?
Right.
Well, you can't. And we have to be really clear about, and it has to qualify appropriately through, kind of the bond regulations around what you can or can't do.
Just the perception of what somebody in the voting booth sees this might.
Clarity will be important, Lisa, if this is the way we go, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, so we'll take this up for action next week.
Correct.
All right. So we'll move on to, we've got to agenda item 8, consider and approve the school director's line item budget.
Yeah, that's in your packet, and again, we've done this. I think important to know that last year you did not have your the school director salaries in there, and they are included in this in budget. And again, what you see in here is in the budget, and so if you do something different or more or less, then we would have to make the changes in the current. But what you see here is a reflection of your salaries, as well as some other changes.
Can you just tell me what line item the additional time that we're using RETN is in? Because I didn't see that
Yep.
reflected here.
Yes, it's under purchase services. We hadn't received a bill last week. If it's helpful to the board, I did a projection of 2014 subsequent to this, so I could put up on the board with
Great.
projections.
That'd be great.
It'll show more than what you have in front of you.
So John, does the 4,160, is that from the time where we were just doing 2 meetings one meeting a month?
Well, one meeting a month was not, we weren't charged for the one meeting a month.
Right, so we
Yes.
just, okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna take that, let's see, I'll make it a little bigger. So, in the current year, 14 projection, there are no salaries, there's FICA, Medi-FICA, workers' comp for our support here at the meetings, our administrative support for the meetings. There's the Ted Manazar Board Award, purchase services. The way I see it is the election is going to cost $4,000, and the RETN here, purchase services, is the difference of $2,690. Copier is at budgeted. Advertising and marketing, we had some more funds in there this year because board members didn't take a salary, and that's where that got moved to last year. Printing and conferences is pretty explanatory.
So let me just make sure I know what you're saying. So
Yes.
so the cost of the additional, of televising the additional meeting is about $2,500 a year.
A little bit more, yeah, 27, yep.
Okay.
And the election costs in the past, the city had gotten behind on billing us, so we had to, we paid them out of a budget, maybe my office or David's office before, but the election, I think, needs to go into the board budget. So, and that's pretty predictable now, where it wasn't before. So that's why the purchase services is higher than it had been.
So did it move from some other place to this place?
Well, a couple years we didn't get it, and then we didn't get one, and then we had to use some contingent funds to pay for billing. So yes, last year I think my office paid for it.
And you're not rich enough this year to do it?
Well, I mean, the district paid for it, but it's where it's characterized. You can't kid me, can you? Sorry.
So we're looking at basically a $6,000 increase that largely covers improving our communication by covering every meeting through
For
RETN and then the election as well.
Right.
Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Yes.
So do you need action on this?
Yeah, policy governance says that that's why we call it out separately. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? So I will take a motion to approve the school director's line item budget as proposed by administration.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Thanks, John.
On to agenda item 9, discussion and adoption of the South Burlington School District FY 2015 budget. I guess I have to move back, huh?
No, I think you're gonna be okay.
Okay.
We're gonna try to be simpler on the, again, you all have most of you have a budget packet in front of you, and we're gonna highlight some things here in just a minute around what's changed in that packet. And then, we also have some other things that I wanna just identify before I start. So in your packet, and I think there are some extra copies that are around, obviously as this has gone on or has evolved, we have some pages in here that are different. And so the very first thing is page 2, and we're going to just talk briefly about some of what's the change in, all right? So on page 2, which is the budget, our budget worksheet, or as folks know it, and in this, you see that we've dropped off the annotation of the reduction amount of the 622. And so this is now the recommended budget in which we're asking the board's approval of. And so John and I are going to go back and forth here on just providing some highlights. Anything else you want to add to that, John, on the changes on page 2?
No, and well, yes, there is, if the board has changes, we're set up to go back to the board and make those on the spot, so there's no question about what it does to taxes or spending.
So this is a working copy. Page 3A is the next one, and we've added some additional information in here, and I'm going to ask John just to highlight for you some of this.
The top box is what we've seen before. The revenues are either what we call local revenues or the draw from the ed fund, which is property taxes. And
John, you want this?
yes, budget
3.
summary, page 3.
Oh.
I could put it up on the board pretty easily too.
I think you're okay. Page 3,
Okay.
not 3A. I'm sorry.
Do we have any extra, does anybody want extra copies of this? Do we have extra anywhere else?
Yep.
No, there's a few changes in a second.
It's 3. We're on page 3.
2 below the 3, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here, thank you.
Looks like that.
It's the one on top.
Okay.
Yes, 2 to the 3rd power.
All right, John, I think people it's 3 and 3A are changed in your packet.
Right.
More detail.
The revenues, we won't go into too much detail on. We've our revenues are pretty much flat. We do have a carryover from our fiscal 12 audit that adjusts us, that helps us a little bit with local revenues. And our federal revenues are down. And that's all illustrated on page 4 later on. We'll go to expenditures though now. Salaries and wages together amount to $35 million, which makes up 80.15% of our total budget. What we're budgeting now is salaries up 1.7% and benefits up by 3.15%. Now, contractually, we look at what our obligations are. We don't know everything about them because our labor contracts aren't in place yet, but negotiations are ongoing. So that's something you should know. In our salary line, teacher salaries are up by 1%. Step increases are included in the amount, as well as changes in the roster of teacher from the prior year and this year's additions and reductions. So that's what's the teacher salaries. The administrative and support position line is up by 8.68%, and it needs to be explained. We had an employee who basically does work with assistive technology who was actually in the teacher line by mistake, and that got moved down here, which is a big part of the increase. We also have budgeted our non-union support staff increases in this line item, so those two make up most of this increase of 8.68%. The increased amount for substitutes and paras are both up based on experience in the past few years. The district has worked pretty hard to reduce overtime expense in the past 5 years, and this line item's decreased by $21,000, which is about 20% of the total. Health insurance premiums, and these are the big items. Health insurance premiums are up by about $280,000 in this budget, and as the premiums have increased by 4.5%. The actual cost of health insurance on a year-over-year basis is 5.5%, and there are changes in coverage, people going from two-person to family and that kind of thing, so that there are changes too in our employee mix. So it's not just the rate increase there. On the next page, we have purchase professional services are up district-wide, and mainly it's because of our in-school mentoring program, which was funded by grants previously, but this year it'll be funded by the district. It affects 4 schools, and the expenses are shown in the guidance area of each of the elementaries and the middle school.
Can I ask just a quick question about that?
Yes.
Is that funding necessary because it's no longer going to be funded by Howard Center, or is it that we want to take it in-house? I mean, does the program go away if the
grant dollars, are, you know, what was started are going away.
Okay.
And so it's the pickup of through our fund.
So what else is in that line, John?
Well, it's a lot of things. It's our auditors, our attorneys, our special ed services that are outside. So it's quite a bit. It's quite a bit of everything. Our audit services are down a little bit, and our legal negotiations are up a little bit. Okay. Purchase property services are in that line is the area where we have done costs, our plant repair projects, the roof at our Rick Marcotte Central School this summer, or the floor upgrades that we've been doing on an ongoing basis. Because we're getting money from the bond, we're reducing that line in to help offset that, as part of the offset of the bond coming on. Other purchase services is down by $100,000, and really there's a lot of money in that line item, but it's really because of 2 things. One, our tech center, what we pay to the tech centers is down because a few of our students are going there. They're and it's primarily due to participation in the Big Picture program at the high school. And then there's some services that have been provided in the past by outside contractors, which are now being performed here. It's something that we talked about in the budget, in the late hours of the budget, about how we would do some programs here at the middle school. And that turned out to be actually a good savings and a good solution to the problem we were dealing with. Spending up on computers will increase by $128,000 over last year. Of this, $62,000 is for the completion of the one-to-one laptop program to grades 7 to 12. The 12th grade kids haven't had computers. Sabina can confirm that, one-to-one. And so the approval was, ongoing, but it was to go from grade 7 to 12, so that's where we'll be. Another $95,000 more is included for grades K to 6, because those areas were deferred last year. So between K5 through 6, $105,000 will be expended this year. And then the little table here shows our expected expenditures over the next 5 years, 6 years actually. Then the last area is, 2 more areas. The miscellaneous costs and contingency line has several items. One is program evaluation for the Common Core math programming. It's $45,000. And I think that's the initial investment from what I understand. David will get into it more. We've had a lot of requests from principals that weren't, we had to say no to, and he'll talk about that. But this is one that is really important because federal and state standards, this is where we're going, and we have to be ready for that.
Let me start by going back to the computers.
Yes.
The total cost, that's, each of those numbers is per year. That's not a summative. That is an individual yearly increase.
That's correct.
Oh, that's not an increase every year, but is the total expended.
Right.
Yeah.
That's additional money which is being spent. It's not you're adding on to the previous year. So in each of the years there, you're spending between $400,000 and $500,000 per year.
Per year,
for computers.
that's right. Yes.
And those are mostly leased, correct?
The one-to-one costs are, we buy the computers over 4 years, lease them over 4 years. Everything else we buy outright.
But that's the largest
Portion of the
portion of the
expense.
total cost
Yes.
on an annual basis.
Right.
Okay.
How many computers are we talking about for that sum of money? About?
Well, the amount is $62,000, and it's about 175 computers. I have I don't have the exact numbers here, but I have them really available.
That's just for the $62,000 increase.
That's for one
Yes.
class.
For one class.
Yes, Steve Walker's, he did a summary of licenses. We have 13,000 computers that were, no, don't print that, 1,300 computers. Wow. What a difference a zero makes. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's the wrong way.
I don't know. Are each of these one-to-one computers, are they used structurally throughout the entire curriculum? Or are these basically for students to take the computers home? How do they work into the educational program?
Yeah. So Jerry, it does vary between the middle and the high school. Ideally, we'd like to see full integration, and so we're working to that end. There are certainly core areas of the curriculum where they're, more heavily used than others. And so, but again, through professional development, which has been ongoing, that's definitely our trend. Okay. And again, even grades and corrections that are made, that's all happening through through the online process. So, yes.
Okay, let's see. The next number 2 is $125,000 has been budgeted as a transfer to nutritional services to cover past deficits. It's an issue we've talked about quite a bit, and so that's in the budget right now. And finally, there's contingent funds. For one, all employee contracts will be negotiated, not settled. There may have to be trade-offs between contractual commitments and outstanding district liabilities, such as the staff retirement plan. Part of the amount in contingency is to cover unforeseen costs of facility repairs and also changes in enrollment. This year we have one position in reserve if we get an enrollment surprise or that kind of thing. So. In the past, we've carried 2, but the budget is tight, and we decided to cut that back. And finally, as far as main changes in the budget, the debt service line is shown down here, and the effects of putting this bond online is shown in the little box at the bottom. So I'll just walk everyone through that. In the 14 budget, the 2005 bond was paid for from proceeds of the bond itself, so it had a net effect of 0. The 1995 bond had a payment of $565,000 for a total of the two together of $565,000. In our budget for facilities, we had $368,000 for work that we did last summer, fixing the switchgear at the high school and big projects like that, and contingency. So we spent on debt and facility needs $933,000. In the next year, if the voters allow us to permit us to use the $1.6 million, $1.7 million, the debt service on that bond will be $209,000. The amount due on the 95-96 bond goes down by $100,000. So our budgeted debt service is up by $110,000. But our budget for facility needs, we're cutting back our projects to about $158,000 of projects, and we have $100,000 in contingency, which we may or may not use. So that is kind of the picture, the story about the funding for our projects. There's one other good piece of news. The 2005 bond has just been refunded. So what that means is like a new mortgage, and the Vermont Bond Bank just completed that. So our interest over the remaining 12 years will be reduced by some $40,000 or $50,000. So that's over time. And there will be a resolution that the board needs to look at for next meeting to approve our portion of that refunding through the bond bank. So that just came, all these things just seemed to come yesterday, but it did, so.
How often does the Vermont Bond Bank refund this thing?
Well,
Change the interest rate, that's fine.
they only do it when the costs of going out are far below the cost, the benefits to the various projects. So our attorney, Paul Giuliani is the attorney for the bond bank. He gave an explanation of why they did it now. And they've been contemplating this for a long time. So it's not very often.
Can they go up and, can they raise it?
Oh, no, they would never do that.
Oh, okay.
Because it's fixed unless they do this refunding. Yes.
So John, if I can summarize what you've covered so far, on expenditures, about 80 to 81% of the budget that's being proposed covers salary, wages, and benefits.
Yes.
And then you've identified 6 categories that contribute to the balance of the 19% of the budget, that include purchase professional services, purchase property services, other purchase services, computers, miscellaneous costs and contingency, and then the debt service.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about kind of less than 20% of the budget that is not salary and benefits at this point.
That's right.
Okay. Thanks.
So can you tell me how the operating costs, which increased by 7.25%, fit into this grand scheme? Where do they live?
The operating costs, the overall budget went up 3.22.
Right.
Yes.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But the operating costs, give me some concrete examples of how some operating costs in the school system went up. 7.25% is a big number compared to, for instance, salaries went up only 1.71%. So operating costs went up a big deal. There must have been a reason for that.
Yeah, it's up about $500,000, John, on this expenditure line item, and I think it's in the categories you've covered here.
It is. I think a lot of it's in that contingent line because we're not
Calling it out specifically.
yeah,
Okay. So you're leaving yourself some breathing room for increased costs, which you do not yet fully appreciate.
Or fully no.
Yeah,
Right.
as well as we've got a baseline number in salary and, well, benefits, I think we know for 1 year, but for salary, we've got 3 collective bargaining conversations going on right now, so there's a potential there as well.
I mean, just ask a question of how this is gonna, how we see this going forward. There are a few items here I'd like to discuss in some detail, but I don't want to upset the flow of where things are going.
Well, what I would suggest is let us, again, we made some changes to the packet as a result from the last meeting, so we're kind of going through
Yep,
this, and
that's fine.
these obviously have some additional detail from what was the page that you had last time. So I think if we can just get through that and explain it, and if you can keep track of kind of where you want to go
Okay,
back board, and then we'll go back,
Pick it up when we get to it,
Yeah.
okay?
if that's okay. Yeah. So we'll go on to 3B, and again, I don't know if there's any other specific questions on
Oh, I
this.
see. Yes, 3B, special education costs. We were asked to provide some detail on that. And the expenditures are up 1.6%. And you know, what's happened is our contracted services have been flat. We have had paraprofessionals added for certain students, certain people with their IEPs, students with their IEPs. One thing that makes the special ed costs, it puts pressure on, is the federal money that comes through IDEA is down quite a bit. And our state reimbursement, the numbers actually are flat or below. Overall, the state number's $10,000 less, but it's typically that goes up, and it didn't based on our service plan this year. That's in the face of, we have 284 IEPs, which is an increase of 22 over the prior year. And once again, the contracts for teachers and paraprofessionals aren't finished yet, so this isn't the final number, but it's.
Sorry, IEP stands for what?
Individual education plan.
Okay,
Students
and
that qualify.
the number you just gave, 228, what is that number? Is that the number of individuals?
Yes.
And what's your total student enrollment in the school system? Just trying to get an idea.
2,400 is
How
our
much?
total. 2,400 is about our total
2,400,
enrollment.
So you're looking at about 10%.
10%. I had a question around, we also have a level of student need characterized as a 504. Do we know?
504, our population, I don't know, I don't have that percentage off the top of my, we're looking at, we have it. And also early essential
Yeah.
ELL students.
ELL students as well.
And so those are both increases that we've seen over time. So, and again, I think it's important to see that, you know, there's not a direct correlation to just the number of students, because again, there's a variety of supports that they may need. Some very few, and some may need, you know, significant.
Mm-hmm.
And the significance sometimes or often can be associated with a cost. Okay, and then the next page that it is replacing or just updating is page number 5, which essentially is the same graph that the folks saw, you saw before, but the very bottom little box just kind of gives you the average over the period of time. So since 2007, on the left side, you see the actual increases in budget, representing an average over that period of time of 3.3, and on the tax rate increase over that rate of that same period of time is 2.95% increase. Again, we do this only to provide clarity over time. Certainly, what's in front of the board currently right now is a 3.22% and an 8.5% tax rate increase. So that concludes the packet update. And it's likely that you have other questions that we'll come back to. Before we go back to your questions, what I would like to do is, at your place, I think only board, probably I don't have the handouts for everybody else, but it's this one that does give some perspective around what we've been able to collect to date from other districts. And so we've got, obviously, Burlington and ourselves are on here, and Colchester those are the ones that we currently know. And then under Chittenden South, we have the respective schools that are underneath them. We do have that, and we put calls out and working to get Chittenden, CCSU, Milton, and Winooski. So again, just providing some level of clarity currently, and I think most people know that increases in the year-over-year budget are what they are, but definitely, as you know, when we did this exercise at the very beginning of the process, a 0 increase to South Burlington meant an 8-cent tax rate increase, and that's fairly consistent across Vermont in many ways, all over. And those of you who I know Martin was at the symposium, I know Jerry was at the symposium yesterday, and there's been a multitude of conversations happening in and around the state around kind of what's happening with the funding system in the current situation. So, and the other sheet, the next one attached to that is information specific to just the education spending per pupil, and it puts us on there. Again, this is information that we also thought would be just helpful to you.
Yeah, I would just point out that that's the Act 68
Correct.
spending.
So that's
it's not the total spending.
That's right.
We actually spend something in excess of 17,000.
That's right, Dan.
student.
And again, this is consistent with the way it's reported, community to community, and so, you're right.
I just worry about the long-term trends with the revenues, local revenues.
Yeah.
If the gross spending continues to rise and the local, what's called local revenues continues to decline the direction we're on, we're gonna be facing tax increases
Yeah.
forever.
Of
Big
some
ones.
substance, yeah.
Yeah, and I certainly, and you've heard me speak about that and echo that, and try to put some things in place or begin the conversations to help.
Yeah, I would
mitigate that.
just like to encourage us to continue to look at the overall spending, not just the X 68 spending, and also the per pupil spending that includes all the pupils we educate, because increasingly tuition students and changes in tuition students and in school choice students are affecting the dynamic of what's going on fiscally.
And the volatility, yeah. And then I just want to, I got just a couple of pages I just want to read, just on kind of summarizing where we are with the budget, and then I think, board folks, you need to open it up for questions specific to this proposed budget. So, the challenge of developing a budget that works to meet the varying needs of our school community remains important, yet difficult. The proposed budget provides the students of the South Burlington School District with the necessary opportunities to successfully meet our district ends specific to the curriculum expectations for each grade, K through 12. During this process, the administrators requested additional support for programming. Most of these requests were not funded due to the budgeting constraints. Below are some of the key additions that are being recommended in this budget. The Common Core program evaluation that we highlighted just a second ago to comply with the federal mandates. Some middle school leadership in the area to help again support these mandates that are being that are needing to be implemented. Some coordination at the high school for 504 students to ensure that they get an appropriate accommodation and are made available. This coordination is critical. The continuation of the mentoring program, which we identified also earlier, K through 8, with now district funding. The addition of the one-to-one laptop initiative, including 12th grade, and also reinstates the funding for K through 6. The lease purchase of 3 new buses to continue to stay within our stewardship plan. $125,000 is included to fund a portion of the nutritional service deficit. The staff retirement budget includes just over $100,000, more than the minimum that's required. And currently, all 3 bargaining units, as you said earlier, are currently within, and it has monies that allow for that to be have the opportunity. Health insurance premiums, as also indicated, are up 4.5% effective July 1. And to summarize, again, as you just heard, we hope that the utilization of the 2005 series bond to fund the needed repairs and upgrade to be compliant with the new ADA standards and continued support of the stewardship plan, again, while keeping neutral to the taxpayers of South Burlington. The budget represents an 8.5% increase on the residential tax rate. About 2/3 of the increase is due to state changes in the state tax rate. 1/3, as you said earlier, Elizabeth, is attributed to the changes in district spending. Prior to factoring in income sensitivity, the residential property tax impact would equate to about a $420 increase on the average home, which is a $326,000 home in South Burlington, and about $290 increase on a $225 average condo price. And so the total increase currently that's in front of the board tonight is a budget that represents a 3.22% increase over the previous year. So at this point, I know that the board likely has a fair amount of questions. And again, as John said earlier, we do have the ability to make some changes for you through a desire either in additions or reductions.
Well, this might be a good time for me to ask some of these questions. Okay. First of all, this 8.5% increase, maybe you could help us understand a little bit. If we were absolutely level in the budget and made no change to the to the year-to-year budget, gross budget, what's your best estimate of what would be happening to the taxes?
I think that would be the 5.64%, 2/3 of the 8.25.
Right. Which is consistent with what we.
Yeah, I'm just
which is what we
asking you to say that so that
Yeah,
it's on the record here, okay?
Right. There wouldn't be a zero impact. It's, again, over 5%
Yes.
increase.
Yes.
And so, again, we did this exercise.
And that would imply significant changes to the way you're actually operating.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, now I'd like to talk about two things which I consider to be board discretionary items. The first is this $125,000 that's directed to going to the nutritional services deficit. My best understanding is that this money is money that we would pay to ourselves. And I would very much like the board to consider taking that out of the budget completely so that it doesn't impact the tax at all. Because the way it's structured right now, it will end up in additional contingency in the budget, and it will show up as an increase in the tax rate, however small that might be. Okay, so I don't know if we can have a discussion about that or what we want to do about it, but my proposal is that that item be stricken from this year's budget.
What I don't like about that is in our management letter, it's specifically called out, and they suggest that the auditors suggest that we pay
The way
ourselves.
I read that, Julie, is it asks us to develop a plan as to how we're going to deal with it. It doesn't say we have to pay it off. It said we could forgive it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree with you on some
Yeah,
level,
so
but I
let-
just don't love the.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, you're in a little bit of a different place perhaps now than you maybe were a few years ago. I mean, we definitely, in the spirit of what Dan is saying, we have a plan. I hope our plan continues to be in the positive outcome in the nutritional services, and certainly the trend data right now is proving to be that. I'm really, again, we've asked the questions, we've gotten some opinions, and they've been suggestions. From the auditing perspective, John Stewart is not going to tell you anything different than what's already been provided. You do have this discretion at your place. It's definitely within your purview. It's not illegal. It's something that you can certainly do. Again, it's a program that's been within our program, and you can certainly do that. So
Can I just say what the nutritional services component there is, what it exactly encompasses? And my philosophical point is, if you're going to spend $500,000 on computers, I'd like to see you spend $500,000 on nutrition.
Yeah.
I think you get a lot more bang for your buck if you do that.
So Jerry,
That's my opinion.
so obviously, the nutrition service is an enterprise fund, so it functions essentially on its own under the umbrella of the district.
Well, it's supposed to function on
Yeah, and so over the years, it's
the reality is.
it's not been whole. We have other enterprise funds that actually have been able to make a profit. The nutrition service has not done that. We've developed a plan. We actually are in a place now where it is on a successful trend, and paying off that deficit is what the board is currently faced with a decision. The issue that they really have, though, is that somebody paid that bill. The nutrition service bill under the umbrella of the district enterprise fund, the district paid those bills. And so this is the quandary that the board is in, is that if we pay off that, isn't that coming right back to, so it's really that conversation. That's probably overly simple, but that's been what's in front of them probably for the last 3-4 years.
It's a check for $125,000 from the school district to the school district, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I
Does
mean,
it go to the general fund, John?
It does. If we did that, though, it would be an expense to the general fund, because if we wrote off the loan, that would be an expense to the general fund, we'd decrease our fund balance, and eventually would put us in a deficit situation overall.
So, I mean, I agree with Dan as well, but if there's discomfort, I would at a minimum want to decrease that $125,000 fairly significantly. I might think differently, except that we seem to be heading the right direction. It might take us 20 years to make up for what the deficit is.
Yeah, we essentially
but-
have 6 months of data. I think we're doing really well too, but we essentially only have six months
Right.
of data on which to make this decision, and I don't think that's enough.
Well, that's why I would, I guess, reduce it from
So how do
125,000
we
to
get to
50,000.
125,000?
I think it was pulled
It was a
out.
random number.
That was
So,
really, we've got a, I mean,
Perhaps we could agree
it's
on a
really a
different
deficit
number,
that we have, yeah.
maybe $50,000, okay?
John?
I'm not gonna weigh in too much on this, but it definitely was not a random number.
It was
We-
like
we
6
have-
years. We
I
chose
stand
a
corrected.
a period of time, didn't we talk? about
Right.
We
It
want it
was,
done in 5
yeah.
years or
Right.
6 years,
It was
and
over
how much
time.
do we have to do? Well, let's make it 15 years, you know, we're,
No.
It's fine.
Why don't
How
we,
much is the
See, my-
food budget?
well, the
within
food,
school
the
system?
nutritional services is intended to be break even, so we,
Alright.
to your point about how much is spent, we really do invest that much, if not more, in nutrition for our students, but it is either subsidized or compensated for by families and staff and so forth. What we're talking about is a deficit that we've been running for probably about 5 years or more.
Carrying, yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about about $300,000 to $400,000 that we have some exposure of the district, and we're just trying to figure out how to address that.
Do the students have a favorable impression of food service within the school?
This year they do.
We've invested in some changes
For the
that,
right reasons.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, that's good.
I think our staff can speak to.
But there's a salad bar.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
I had salad bar today. It was very good.
All right.
No, just asking for
And
procedural.
homemade soup.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
cream of broccoli soup
If
today.
you come to the high school
Yeah.
for lessons.
Okay.
If I make a motion, will that bring this to a head and we can decide what to do, or how is it handled?
What I'd like to propose doing, rather than make a motion on an individual line item, is maybe get through the board discussion on the total budget and consider having John model any changes.
What changes you
That
want? Mm-hmm.
we'd like to consider. So why don't we kind of get through the total board discussion and input from the public, and then we could kind of do a model on a one-shot basis,
Okay?
if everybody's in
That's a
agreement with
discussion
it.
on the nutritional service.
I like the idea of 50,000. We want to show we're making some progress.
Wait. I don't think we can just randomly pick 50,000. So John, if 125 was not a random number, it was based on how many years of repayment? Do you remember that?
We wanted to do it over 3 years, but then the deficit continued into the 4th year, so we didn't make any progress.
Why'd you pick 3 years?
Because at the point in time, it was $375,000.
So that was the random part. So I'll say 10 years.
Well, no, it wasn't, well, it wasn't
No?
apparently about that.
Okay, all right, no, well then what's
Pay
that,
down
well,
that deficit in a logical way based on what we thought was reasonable for the district to be able to do. So it wasn't a one-time hit, it was to try to sequence it over time.
right, no, I understand that. But you picked 3 years because it seems reasonable and such, but 10 years, I mean, we're talking about a bond to finance something that has been around for years and years. So I guess my point, there's not a legal requirement, there's not an auditor's requirement, there's not any requirement to pay it off in a certain period of time. And there's even continuing question of whether we have to do it at all. So we may never resolve that question because Rich tried his darndest and he left without having resolved it. But at least minimize, keep addressing the problem until we see how maybe we're doing better, and maybe they're gonna start, the nutritional services will not just break even, but we'll start paying it off as well. I'd rather be conservative in how quickly we're paying it down now until we get a little more data,
So
rather than.
we'll have a chance to adjust the amount that the board would propose paying off that deficit. I would just kind of suggest to the board that from a material standpoint, the 125 versus the 50 versus 200, my guess in the model is not going to make a material difference on the tax rate impact that we're talking about. But
I would agree with you if I felt that the taxes were being used for some net benefit to the community, and I don't think that's the case in this case. I think what's happening is we're going to tax the community and we're going to put additional money de facto into contingency. And we'll spend it
yeah.
for something other than what we thought we were spending it for.
And I think, and some of that is, do we have a liability or not that on behalf of the community we have to address? And how it gets addressed is kind of what we're talking about, so, okay.
And you will have the ability to put
Okay.
whatever you want in there if you want to see
If
what the
anything.
effects
Okay.
happen, yep.
All right.
So I have another item?
Yes, what's your other item?
So the other item that I'd just like us to be conscious of what we're doing on has to do with the staff requirement overpayment, if you will. There's $100,000 proposed that we put in beyond the minimum. I'd like to just point out that the numbers that we work with there are given to us from actuaries who use a couple of numbers that make this number hard for me to understand anyhow. First of all, they assume a return on investment of the money we have in there of 7% at the present time, which is optimistic, I think. And secondly, they use a mortality table that dates back to 1951, and I have a very sneaking suspicion that lifetimes have increased in the meantime, and therefore the obligation is really bigger than what's stated. So the question is $100,000 really anywhere near enough, much less more than the minimum, against what the real obligations are going to likely turn out to be? So I think that, and I don't know if John's willing to speak to this, but I asked the administration if they would take a look at this a little differently, just so we could get this in a different perspective, and that is, with the money that we currently have, how long can we pay the payments that we know are coming? Just a snapshot today. If everything stayed exactly the way it is today, how long would it last with the funds that we have today? Because I believe that we ought to be looking at that number and trying to do our best to push that number out to more and more years each year. And I don't know how much money it takes to do that, but I'd like us to think about doing that a different way. So while I'm not advocating a change here right now in terms of the number, I am advocating that, like I did with the budget thing, that we think about this a little differently than we've been thinking about it. So I don't know, John, are you willing to comment on, am I putting you in a bad spot?
No.
Let me just add one thing to add to what John needs to comment on. But presumably, the number of years going out might also be affected by the fact that we're not bringing on any new people to that pension fund, because we've changed the contract and now it's going to be a defined contribution as opposed to defined benefit. It seems to me that should affect, not right away, but over the course of the life of this pension, it's going to affect how long we can, in a positive way is what I'm saying.
It will affect over time, and it was a great move. I think that's the best move that's been made, both for employees and for the plan over the years. So, but that's a long term. Some of our employees were hired before that went into effect in September, and they're 20 years old.
Right, but
So
I'm just saying, if Dan, and I like Dan's idea, it's just that in another 10 to 20 years, the money that we're putting in is going to stretch longer. I mean, it's going to lengthen the time that we're going to be able to pay.
That's what I think we have to look at.
Right.
I don't think we can make a decision based on this one number today. I think I'd like to start the process of thinking about it that way, so that we can see whether we're really making progress against the obligation we have versus this what I think is a number that was actually created, as I understand the process, was actually created for private companies who wanted to get the support of their pension plans from the government. If you recall, a few years ago, General Motors cashed in their retirement programs and had the federal government take it over. Well, in order for them to take it over, they have had to do things. They had to compute this number, report it, and do things over time. That's where it comes from, as far as I know. And the public sector is different, but it still uses that same thing. And I really am really concerned that the numbers they use are just terribly optimistic, and they overstate the funding status of any retirement program that uses that metric.
John, do you want to comment?
Yes, Dan did ask me to come up with asked for the actuaries to come up with an estimate of how long our current investment would last if the investment stayed the same amount that it is today. And I didn't know if I'd get that number in time, so I calculated it, because I think about this almost every day, especially when the market in 2009 went down to 3.2. Our investments went down to 3.2 million, and I thought, how many years does this last? So I But I did a calculation myself and came up with 12 plus years. And then independently, the actuary did their calculation and came up with 12 plus years. So that's one way to look at it. We've been riding a pretty good, the markets have been riding a pretty high crest right now. So the idea that 12 years is today could be 10 years tomorrow. And our payout of benefits is a little bit more predictable than like to Dan's point, than the investment gains or losses. So that is one way to look at it. And I know with the tax year, I understand the tax implications. I think our plan over the years has been to contribute more than the minimum. And the $150,000 was a way 3 years ago that the board said, let's do this and let's take it seriously. There's only a couple school districts that have their own pension plan. So we're in a kind of a unique position where we have this liability, we have this responsibility to 323 people. So and the district for many, many years funded at the minimum and paid the liability on the very last day that they could, rather than make payments every month like we're doing now. So we've changed some things that helped us. And right now we're at the highest level funded it's been in 24 years. Is that because we make payments every month? No, a lot of it's because of the market. And we went to the city, with the city, and picked a new investment manager who's got got really good expertise, has really good expertise. So we've done a lot of things to get this rolling. I understand in a year where this budget looks like this, we instead of keeping our level constant, our contributions level constant, we've already recommended that you cut it by $30,000. So
specific to this, the support staff pension funding, we're at a minimum, we're funding the required minimum. And I don't think, Dan, I'm not hearing you suggest that we not necessarily fund it for the $100,000 above the minimum that the administration's recommending, but it's really we've got a fixed pool of employees, and it really sounds, for purpose of 2015, I don't hear a specific recommendation unless you want to model it.
No, I was, as I prefaced the thing, it's one of the items that I think is a significant discretionary thing, if you will, on the part of the board. It's a board decision. They give us recommendations. It's a little softer than we know that the healthcare costs went up for 250 employees or whatever it is by 4.5%, 5%. Right? I mean, those are pretty. I can't do a whole lot about that, but I just wanted to make us know that we're making $250,000 worth of decisions on the budget. That's purely up to us. It's up to nobody else. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Any other specific areas that the board would like to bring up at this time? I have one that I didn't, I know I sent it in for questions, but I don't know if it was addressed on staffing and class size.
Mm-hmm. So again, I think as I alluded to in my remarks, I mean, there was additions desired by the principals. And again, I'm going to tell you that, at the elementary level, the volatility is much greater. I mean, we have self-contained classrooms, and so that continues to be what I'm going to say a little bit of a higher risk. And so in this particular proposed budget, and this is on page 15B, you see in the elementary schools, you see some volatility here. And so that while there is a reduction in at Orchard, there is an increase at Central School. And I think it's important to note that given under No Child Left Behind and currently Rick Marcotte Central School being identified as a choice in school, we've had a high higher migration out of the Chamberlain and Orchard to Rick Marcotte. And so while I have concerns in the kindergarten area for specifically Orchard and Chamberlain, I do feel like it's a known trend that we've had now over the last 2 years where we've had some volatility specific at Central School. And so that's a staffing component that I think is important that the board notes. We currently do have some contingent money, as we did last year. Again, the volatility in these particular grades, we never know exactly what's going to happen. We hope kids move in. We believe our forecasted enrollment projections are fairly accurate. However, the big question mark is always kindergarten, and then on top of that becomes also the choice issue. So, again, there's some other components moving around as well in staffing, but predominantly, and we already reported on the support staff side, there's been some increases that are resulting from additional needs by students or for students.
So on I don't know, you may have this in the packet somewhere, but on a year-over-year basis, what were our FTEs last year for maybe the 3 main employee groups, and what are they in this proposed budget?
I would have to just do some. We are not in some ways. There's a reduction, but it's a transfer at the elementary. We have about 7 FTEs in for support staff. That's different from than the previous year budget for again support staff, and for the non-union administrative / other areas, we proposed some increases, but have made we're about flat in that area. So. The overall, I would say, and again, John, you can correct me if you're able to, we're about 7-8 FTEs larger than we were the previous year. And again, that's not all just transferable to the teacher corps. Let me just see if I can.
Do we have that in this packet or a previous packet?
There are in previous, but I'm going to tell you that it's not. I'm not able to just point you right to that one. The overall FTE total district, if you're looking at for all categories rolled, from what was budgeted to where we are now, there's been some definite changes in that, and again, primarily in the area of our support staff category.
So what I'm hearing is a net increase of about 7
correct
FTEs in the support staff area.
Correct.
With the others being some shifting in the
correct
in the K through 12 teaching staff.
Correct.
And then the balance is neutral as well, administrative and other.
Again, I think important to note, as I read that summary around the projected desire, there were some things in there that were some monetary pieces for program, some 504 coordination, and so those are fraction of some pieces in there. Again, I'll be honest with you that I have some real concerns around our staffing, and although that's why we cut our contingency from 2 to 1, and we're making some harder decisions, particularly in some of these grades, based on some volatility of back and forth. So I can certainly give you, the specific, kind of run rate, what was budgeted, where we are actual as a result of some of the needed, and where this budget is. Again, it's a move. It does move.
Okay. Diane?
I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about paraprofessionals versus special educator, and at what threshold do you decide we need to hire a special educator versus using a paraprofessional? And I see that there was some work done with Michael Giangreco, and that was in 2008, and I just wondered if there was any additional plans to look at that.
Yeah. Well, and again, I know Joanne is here tonight, but let me just start out by saying, I think I mean, we have a great desire to have what we'll say the least restrictive environment. And I think it's important, particularly from providing services, that we'd like children to be served in an environment that's as equal for me as it is for you. But what we also know is that we have an obligation to accommodate and to allow for instruction to occur. And so definitely, as we've had some demographic changes across our corridor, we've definitely been faced with some additional challenges. How we deal with those challenges are delicate, whether they're in the classroom, out of the classroom for additional support, or more intensive related services. I think this will always be a concern for us on where that right balance is. When you have so many students in a particular class that may be having a difficulty, at what point is too many adults in that room that then impede instruction? And so we've spent a lot of time, and I would say, you know, to Joanne's credit, this is a conversation, and I think the principals could certainly attest to, this is not something that we take easily, just adding another staff. That's not necessarily the right resolve for accommodating a student. But Joanne, I would ask if you...
Can I clarify
Yep.
my question? I'm actually asking, at what point do you hire another teacher,
Mhm.
a special educator, versus a paraprofessional?
And from my perspective, I don't think there's a great formula. And I want to let Joanne respond. It's really, what I worry about in that category is I don't think you can say it's a 7-to-1 ratio, because every child's very
Right.
different. But let me defer to you and allow you to...
We use that work that Michael Giangreco did, and we annually, I have a worksheet that I use with the administrators where we look at the ratio of special educators to the total school population. We look at the ratio of the special educators to the kids on plans. So we use several metrics to look at that, and we try and make sure that there's enough special educators within a building to meet the needs of those students. And we have, each building has their own sort of model of special educators and paraeducators, with the intent of trying to have all the children, including the children with special needs, to have instruction with professionals as much as possible, and have the paraeducators be assisting classroom teachers and special educators. On top of that, we also have intensive transitional interventionists, like higher level paraprofessionals that are hired that may work with kids with intensive needs. And we have a whole independence protocol around how we hire and keep those. So there's a lot of thought and planning that goes into that, and we use Michael Giangreco's research around the ratios that make it possible for the work to get done. But as David said, it's not as simple as just the numbers. There's a lot of conversations that happen between myself and the principals around making sure that the needs are being met. So that's how we do it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Can I go back to the question on the staff FTEs?
Mhm.
Just trying to make sure I understand this. I'm looking at page 14, and you say there's 7 additional FTEs. Is that's relative to what was budgeted last year, not what we actually had to end up using last year? I'm looking at and seeing that budgeted and actual for last school year. The current proposed number of FTEs, I think, is pretty close to the same, maybe even down a little bit from what was the actual number of FTEs for staff last year. Is that correct?
Yes.
So when you say there's 7 additional FTEs, it's not, it's comparing it to last year's budget, not where
Not
we
actual.
actually ended up.
That's in part correct. I mean, there's some moving even from what we budgeted to where we are actually today, and then some additional known increases for next year. So the net total, again, and we've also had some changes from that actual. So what I believe is we have a net increase of 7 in this reflective budget.
But I guess my question, I might
From the
make
actual
sure
or the
from-
budget?
From the actual or budgeted.
Correct.
No,
from which?
It's a question.
Which one?
From the actual.
Right, okay.
From
There-
the
there's,
actual.
there's a, all right, I guess that I just don't see, I mean, that's not evident in this page 14. I mean, it's, I'm looking at proposed for central school, and it's actually 1 FTE less under support staff, unless I'm misunderstanding this graph. It's the same for Chamberlain, and it's a little bit less for Orchard School when I'm looking at proposed fiscal year 14-15 compared to the actual. what through the course of the
Yeah.
year, we had to bring in additional FTEs of
Correct,
support
and you
staff.
see that, right.
So it's with respect to the budget that it seems to be increasing. What we thought last year at this time we were gonna need.
That's correct.
So, I'm just saying, it's not, we're actually, from what we have actually using during this current school year, we're asking for less FTEs. At least that's how I read this particular document.
That's true what you're reading here. Again, I will provide you with some additional clarity around the support staff particularly. Again, on the teaching core, again, very consistent. The support staff has definitely ebbed and flowed, and I'm not, again, this document is a live document that works for us, but I think I gotta look at making sure that this data is correct for you and tells you the story a little bit better.
And if you can aggregate it.
Yeah, I
for
think the
either
FTE.
either the
Yeah.
employee group or the total district, that
Yeah.
would be helpful.
Yeah. Again, I think important in here is I'm not adding major programs. I'm looking to support the needs that are currently there. We've definitely done our work around that support component. There's not major programming being added to support something that's.
Sure, no, I understand, but it's also in a tough budget year to say that we're adding 7 FTEs when in reality, I think the real comparison should be to what we actually have.
And
I think that's.
That kind of gets at the forecasted finish, John. That's in essence a forecast for 2014 versus budget that looks at head count. That would be very helpful in terms of the budget book and conversations we're going to have with the public. But that would be true, John. I don't know if you had a chance to kind of even look at the forecasted finish from a dollar standpoint, but obviously the head count would roll up into that, and that I think would help communicate to the public.
Well, we're doing it line by line.
Okay.
So yes, it'll be available for the budget book, but it is not available tonight.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, unless there's other board questions, I'd like to open it up to the public and as well as our administrators, who
I wanna
most of
thank
them
them
are
for
here,
coming,
if there's
too.
any comments to make. So, Jerry.
So, Jerry Silverstein, I have spent a good amount of time trying to understand education spending in the state of Vermont. And a couple of weeks ago, I started out being totally outraged when I saw an 8.5% increase. And after learning everything that I have since then through email exchanges with Elizabeth, speaking to David, going to the education conference yesterday, I have moved to a neutral position. I really have no idea. I will not be voting yes on the budget come March, but whether I vote no is a whole other question. My concern is it's important to look at fine details and the big picture. And as I went through the budget and sitting here tonight, the truth is I can't evaluate the fine detail in your budget. Like I mentioned to you the phones, $163,000 for phones. There's no way I can know just by looking at that line item number how realistic that is or whether there's a lot of surplus in it. I just can't. It's the same thing with the computers. Without seeing your outcomes assessment, I don't know that spending $500,000 a year on computers for your student is getting you a lot of bang for your buck. I would say with nutrition you'll get that, but that's a whole other story. So I want to look at it from the big picture and provide you with some details on how I'm looking at it. You all know that cost per pupil and spending is going up in the state of Vermont. Okay. Yesterday's education conference, the number that Mr. Ficus presented was about $16,700 per student statewide. I've seen another 2013 report which said the cost per pupil is $18,500. So you never know which of these numbers is right. But Daphne Kenyon, who was one of the panelists yesterday, said we're spending twice as much per student as they are in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. And the assessment exam suggested there's not much difference between the students in Vermont versus New Hampshire or Massachusetts. So you're spending a lot more money per pupil here, and you may not be getting a whole lot more bang for your buck. The other problem, of course, is the number of students in the system has been continually going down. So in 2000, you were at 104,000. Now you're at 88,000. The latest numbers I could find for births in the state of Vermont from 2011 suggested 6,000. If you take that number and you multiply by 12 to replace an entire complement of students, you come up with 72,000. So if you go from 2000 to 2025, you've gone from 104,000 down to 72,000, a decrease of 30%. Your cost per pupil keeps going up. If you also look at the number of people living in Vermont, the growth rate, last year for the first year in over a decade, the number of people living in Vermont declined, went down by about 2,700. Population decline means that 6,000 number is not likely to go up. Now, no one can predict the future, but you do your best by looking at the hard numbers to make extrapolations to know where you're going. What I'm saying here is I understand the budget a lot more, I understand education spending a lot more, and I understand the logic of everything you've done. But I'm balancing that against the demographic realities of where we're going. And if there's one thing America fails to do all too often, it's look far down the road. Everybody likes to kick that can down the road because it's too hard to deal with reality. And I'll give you one good example. And I said this to David, and I can't remember if I said it to you, Elizabeth. Let's look at college student education. College student loans now are in excess of $1 trillion. 80% of those are federal loans. The burden of college student loans has been driven by what? By faculty salaries and by administrative salaries. It's the biggest thing in the budget, just like it is in the school system. And everybody justifies those increases by saying, we deserve it. We're doing something very important. We're good at what we're doing. We deserve these increases. The end result is you have $1 trillion worth of student loans at the college level. Now, legislation passed first by the Bush administration and supported by the Obama administration has allowed students to pay back those loans along the following schedule. They pay it was originally 15% of their monthly discretionary income. It's now 10%. So take a student who graduates college and gets a job paying $48,000 a year. Divide that by 12 per month. You come up with $4,000 a month. Let's say 25% of their income is discretionary. That would be $1,000. You pay 10% of that. So they pay $100 a month, and they pay it for 20 years. After 20 years, the loan is discharged. It now becomes the property of the federal government, also known as you and I. Now, estimates vary as to how much money is going to be moved over into the government's ledger. But I've seen numbers as high as a couple of $100 billion. Now, the 20 years is for someone who goes into private business. If you go into a public setting, like a public lawyer or a public school teacher, your loan is discharged after 10 years. So you get a feel for the fact that what's happened is education has become very expensive. It's become so expensive that students have to take more and more loans, and the government says we can't burden with young people with so many loans, so after a certain amount of time, we're going to take back that onto ourselves, which means we're taking back that expense onto ourselves. Now, it wouldn't be so bad if that was the only expense the government was taking back on itself. If you want some really exciting reading, I encourage you to read the annual report of the trustees of Medicare and Social Security. They publish a report every year, and they project 75 years into the future as to what excess costs will be for Social Security and Medicare. That is above and beyond everything we take in Social Security and Medicare taxes. How much additional money are we going to need to pay for the expenses which are legally directed by the Medicare and Social Security programs? And it's a 280-page document. And on page 235 is where the really rubber meets the road. There you learn that the unfunded debt obligations for Social Security and Medicare moving 75 years into the future is $40 trillion. $40 trillion. So it's a very big number, and unless we do something about it on a piece-by-piece basis, we're going to arrive at a point in time where the young people, the people in the school system, are going to be hit with so much debt obligation that they really won't understand how it all happened. How is this relevant to the school budget? Although you can justify every line item in that budget, unless we get better control of education spending in this state, the end result is the students are going to suffer the most. This is not just a comment to the South Burlington school budget. It's a comment that I want to make to the state of Vermont, because obviously most of your budget increase is due to the statewide property tax increase, which went up a big amount this year, and is projected to go up equal amount next year. So it's going to happen again next year. Unless we get these costs under control, the people who are going to suffer the most are the ones who you speak on behalf of. That is the students who are going to inherit these debt obligations. I don't know what the answer is, but I know there's a big problem. And avoiding that problem because it's too difficult to deal with just means we're saying to the students, you do it because we can't. And I think that's a terrible legacy to leave to young people. And I'm sorry the student left, because I really wanted the student to hear it and pass it along to her colleagues so that they understand that unless we really address some serious financial issues in this country, they are going to suffer greatly. And again, I don't expect you to solve these problems. But the state, you know, they can't just have these one-day conferences and then not hear anything again, and next year we're gonna have another 8.5% increase in the budget. It's just not a prescription for success down the road. That's my shtick.
I mean, again, I talked with Jerry a little over the past and yesterday as well. I mean, I think I want you to know that your comments are consistent with some of the things that we as a board and administrators are recognizing and talking about. And so we're not, again, I can't speak for other districts or other supervisory or other schools, but I do feel that we are beginning to have a much more in-depth conversation around what I would say a more economic model in which we can serve students. And we currently, you know, have students that come from the islands. We provide students from afar, but yet we have, you know, students that are not very far around our circumference that have a lot of the same programs. So the beginning of the conversation around, you know, a more an efficient model that allows more opportunities that might be more cost effective is definitely upon us, and those conversations are happening now. Again, whether or not that will again have you know, positive outcomes next year, I don't know, but we're working on it. The other part, and I talked to you about this, and I think it's important for others to know, is we're also asking the question around business partnerships, you know, and how can they work into this, or higher education work into this equation, so that we're not, again, having redundant services and maybe providing additional opportunities in a much more economic way. So
keep in mind that that clock is ticking.
Absolutely is. We know it. And so again, we're not there yet, but I'm proud of at least our conversations, and certainly administratively I have them here. And so we're having those conversations, and we've traveled to different places and said, we can do this. We can have a change. And again, we're committed to that, and certainly recognize kind of the issues that we're faced with.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes.
Just seeing that this is the second year of a significant property tax increase, what would happen if the budget goes down?
So obviously, if the budget goes down, it comes back to the board and administrators, you know, with the board's directive to say, what would they like to do? Would they like to, you know, go out and communicate more effectively, or in addition to what we did before with the same budget, or a slightly less budget affecting some of the other programs out there? So that, again, that would come back to the board. We have so many days to do so. You know, there's a process by which we'd have to go back out for a vote, and that can continue to happen for a period of time, almost until school begins, and then the operation of the school can function on a 80% of what was the prior year. So there's some rules in there. Again, we hope that we're trying to do our due diligence, you know, for our community, but also recognition of, you know, kind of the implications, you know, as we've discussed tonight. So we're trying to get this in a better place, and we recognize the strain on the community, but at the same time we recognize the need to educate our students.
Other comments or questions?
I just say, this is Mark Trafilio. Just really I want to support this budget as much as possible, because as you were alluding to, at Orchard, from when I started, we're going to go down 2 students projected, but we have lost 3 classroom teachers in that time, and all of our classroom sizes are rising. And it does compromise relationship building with students, and it does compromise really good instruction. We're really fortunate to have really strong teachers here, and that's been very fortunate. But at the same time, I also really want to support that this is some smart steps, and at the same time, I think, at least I'll speak for the elementary schools and my 2 sister schools, that you know, we work. It's limited. It's more and more limited. You know, we do not have world languages. We do not have enrichment unless it comes to us through the PTO. And so, you know, we have strong basics, which I'm very proud of. But again, it has been compromised the last few years more and more.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Kathy Barrazzo. I have kids at Orchard and at the middle school. And I was just looking at the classroom FTE requirements for next year. And I'm just wondering how, it just seems, it seems off to me. Like Central has 360 kids with 20 teachers. Orchard has 367 kids with 18 teachers. So how is this, that's a pretty big difference. I mean, the Orchard has more kids, less teachers. All right, so the K through 5 average class size is 2 children more at Orchard than Central. So how do we make these decisions, and why is it so different between those two?
So ideally, students don't come in every school and every class equal, obviously. Our kindergarten population and the volatility. As I said earlier, around Rick Marcotte Central School, under No Child Left Behind being a school of choice for the 2 elementaries, because we have 3 similarly configured schools, gives them that choice. And so as a result, that volatility is in part in play in this particular staffing recommendation. Although kindergarten at 12 is low, what we know is it's going to increase likely over time.
So your proposed students you think is wrong?
I do.
Actually go up.
That's right. And I think what's going to, again, what we have is some trend data. We haven't been under this that long, but we have now 3 years of data?
2 years.
2 years of data, where we've seen at the beginning or over the summer and at the beginning, moms and dads taking advantage of that choice. Now again, we believe all of our 3 elementaries are good. They do under No Child have that choice. And so this, what I'm going to say, viewed unbalanced at Central School, or a lower number, is in part.
So what happens if it doesn't change? Let's
Right.
say that these numbers are actually on.
Yeah.
Would you fix would you make it more balanced across?
Right.
Or
So
would you keep to what?
again, part of it is administratively, we have the right to assign, right, where staffing is needed. So if any of these grades, class sizes, significantly change, we do have the right of assignment to appropriately accommodate students. So if we have a major decrease in one, we can move a staff to another location. That's not overly recommended. I mean, again, as you heard, relationships, connection to students and families is important, but again, it's making sure we meet the needs of the students with reasonable class sizes. So yes, we would make that move.
You would make the move if it stayed, if these numbers stayed the same, then you would make it more even across the schools?
Again,
Or only if the numbers change?
well, if the numbers significantly change for us, again, and as I said to the board earlier, I have concerns right now around the, particularly at Chamberlain, again, with the smaller class size of 40, the divisor is difficult, right? I mean, and so with a few students leaving, that would make that much more reasonable. If they don't leave, then we have to make we're going to have to make some decisions there. So what we know is, again, the previous year, we had 34, and so the board did allow for some movement in the budget, and we put a halftime teacher there to help offset. Now that wasn't ideal, because having a halftime teacher wasn't a perfect solution either, but it was better than just the 2. So anyway.
So, I mean, just following out, given the experience that we had at Central, where you predicted 50 students for the current year, and ends up we have 63, why isn't that reflected with the prediction for this year? Why are we not predicting that we're going to have 60 for the same? Is there a reason why?
You're on the kindergarten, Martin?
Yeah, I'm looking just at the kindergarten,
Yeah.
for instance, which is the smallest class, which I would think, if it was 3 teachers there, it's 16 kids per class. But the point is, I'm just wondering.
On that 48.
Yeah, why, I understand volatility, but if we've seen a trend, this thing doesn't seem to reflect the trend. Is that the case, or is there some reason that that's the case? that doesn't.
So-
really-
Even if she went up to 63, though, her kindergarten class size would only rise to 15.8, so that would still be manageable.
So, right, so in part, some of the things that are happening here are the live birth predictions that Bill Smith did for us. And so to stay consistent with that information, particularly at the kindergartens, is one of the things that I've just stayed with. However, given the trend of the previous year, I know that that number has been up in the 60s, and it's probably likely to be consistent with that for next year, if not more. So that's really, you know, my kind of, what I'll say, question mark, because the live births predictions for us in South Burlington equate to the 48, but immigration and movement is a real big concern for me, and probably likely going to be larger than the 63. So, I mean,
which is why, Martin, there are 4 teachers there.
Right.
Because if we really thought it would be.
Right, but I guess, and that's my problem.
And I
with
haven't
this, is that those numbers should be based on all the information we can have,
Yeah.
and be our best guess,
Yeah.
best estimate at what those would be. And then I think that people seeing this
Yeah.
won't jump and be very concerned that, why, I've got 12 in this one class and 23 in this other.
Yeah.
I don't know.
For this purpose, I chose, right, wrong, or indifferent, is to use the data that's been provided to us through Bill Smith and that we've used for many years, that's consistent with other practices. However, and a part of this equation has never factored in the change in the choice option. And again, I think there's a variety of things that are happening here that prove to have an increased number of kindergartners.
I guess the
So,
one comment
I just don't want to
to
plug, a higher number
No,
in
that
there.
makes, that's fine, but this is the kind of data, this page is what I think most parents in elementary school gravitate to.
Yep.
And I think that, in future, if that's the case, you really should have an explanation
And
that if people just see this data, it's going to cause concerns which shouldn't really be there. Because I agree with you completely that this may change.
Well, again, I chose, particularly in the kindergartens across the board, to go based on, Bill Smith's stuff. Definitely, as I move forward in the communication, I'll need to be clear with the community around that particular number.
Right.
Or a disclaimer number or something
Kind
in
of data
parentheses.
sources and assumptions,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Just because that
Yep.
one is one that people really, including me.
All right, so if I can just, unless there's other comments, I had an opportunity to make a comment because Patrick was at our meeting last week, but I do want to, on behalf of the board, thank all the administrators who contributed to developing the budget. I know that after my brief tenure on the board, it's very difficult work, and I know you make a lot of trade-offs. And these are sometimes very tough conversations. And I know you're very sensitive to both the taxpayers' impact of what we're asking for, but also keeping in mind that who we serve first are our students. So thank you for all that. Appreciate it. Would it be the board's pleasure to maybe have John model the impact of, rather than even put it up on the screen, maybe just impact of 100,000 reduction in the budget? Do you want to just give us a barometer of the?
He has it
what that
right
would
on the
look like?
computer.
Okay.
It's probably easier just for the viewing folks to see the board's thinking.
We can just get an idea of
Is that all right?
what that would do. Do I need to move again?
I'm sorry, Elizabeth, we don't have a great space for this.
I'll use the excuse to get a call.
So one of the things, again, I heard Dan say this, and so I'm just gonna, John probably doesn't even wanna type this, but, the $125,000 on the nutrition services, and I'm not saying that's where you go or what you do, but I think just to illustrate, the worksheet for you on what that represents, I think is probably a good metric for you to just see. So can you just do 125?
Sure. Yep.
And then you can, direct from there.
Taking it all out.
That's right, but, so that, that then shows the 125, it drops the total budget to 293, percentage on the tax rate to 811 and 12 cents.
And what's it mean to the average taxpayer?
$19 difference on the, yeah, it was 420, now it's 401.
So, you can take that out, John.
So is there any interest in the board to modify the amount there, or to look at any other areas in terms of a board override to the proposed budget? Okay. Seeing none, Dan, do you want to make a motion regarding an adjustment to the nutritional services line?
Yes. I'd like to move that we adjust the nutrition services budget amount from $125,000 to $50,000.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. Can we make that adjustment so we're looking at a...
Sorry.
I gotta keep moving.
Yeah, we got it down there too.
So that, I'll go through it. The total budget is increase of 3.05%. The tax rate goes to 1.6425 for a just over a 12.5% increase, or cent increase, and a 8.27% increase. That takes the tax on the average assessed home to 409 before income sensitivity, and a condominium to 282. We're well below the state spending threshold as it stands now, so that's where that would be.
Okay. Any other discussion, comments from the public? All right, we're at that point in our agenda where the board needs to adopt the proposed budget. So I'm going to stand back because I have to look at these numbers. Do I have a motion to approve the budget as recommended with the adjustment to nutritional services of $44,297,000, or $297,000, did I get that right? $297, a 3.05% increase on the operating budget for South Burlington. Is that the right motion?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What was the increase? 3.05.
Yeah. It's right here, Pat. This is the number 305. We'll print them off and send it.
And what's that percent increase on the tax rate?
8.27.
Be sure to tell a taxpayer that 66% of that increase, you had nothing to do with.
Well,
Right back. Tweeting it out.
yeah.
66% of that tax increase
It's out already.
was compliments of Montpelier,
Patrick is.
not the school board.
He's tweeting.
Well, that was a big impact when I realized that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and in fairness, Jerry, it's a little bit of we be them.
Yeah, we are them.
Yeah.
And then come to Central for the homemade soup.
On the philosophical side, the benefit of that is, of course, they're equalizing education across the state. And in that sense, you feel good about it. But as much as you can feel good about that 66%.
Depends what equalize means.
I agree, but that's detail.
Aspirations
True.
to equalize.
All right. Thank you, everyone. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 10, consider and approve the annual school district meeting warning.
Yep.
Oh, do I have to move again?
No, you don't.
Okay.
It's in your packet,
Is it in the,
in your
Oh.
board packet, folks. Yes, it does now with a dollar amount.
okay.
So it has the annual meeting warning, Article 1, Article 2. And then it also had the draft language on the bond, but we'll do that, we'll be doing that on the 22nd.
Okay.
So obviously, we need to make the necessary changes. John, is there anything else specifically you wanted to highlight in this at all?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. I missed
the draft. A warning, annual warning?
Oh, no.
Obviously,
no.
Okay. We'll make the necessary changes.
If they are, but we'll have Bob Fletcher here for the next meeting, so there's no problem at the end.
Well, we have an action item on the meeting warning itself. Do we need to take action tonight on that?
No, that's, that will all be at on the
On the 22nd.
The 22nd.
Okay, so
I don't know
item
why
number 10, we don't need action on.
No, because of the two items, we'll take care of it all at once.
Okay. All right, David, announcements?
So in your
I have
packet.
one budget thing. Sorry. The budget book has to be
Thursday.
to the printer essentially next Thursday. So Elizabeth and Dave and I talked yesterday about input from the board, maybe a committee of two, but I need some help with what you think should be in the book. I know we got a lot of guidance. Elizabeth summed things up tonight, so we have some of that. But Friday'd be a great day to meet because I really have very little time to put this together this year. It hasn't been clear as to what we needed to do.
So last year, just so you know, I mean, we kind of have done this kind of not with a lot of direct involvement with the board. We've definitely taken kind of the questions that we've heard come up, and we've kind of put those into our pages, you know, and responded to those. If you have specific questions that you think should be provided in the budget book, it's a great opportunity, and I think, you know, we definitely hear a huge need to explain, you know, the percent increase tax rate and where that goes. But I think it would be great if some of you are willing to just assist and then help us to frame out that language which you could be comfortable with around a response and or the specific questions that you'd like to have addressed given the specific budget.
I know last year we had a chance to, because I remember giving a lot of comments on a draft of the budget book. I wasn't there, I don't think we were there at the initial drafting, but we had, and it was a pretty quick turnaround, I remember, but that's not a problem. I mean, I would like to have the opportunity. I'm not going to have time to sit down on Friday or tomorrow for that matter. But I'm happy to. I'd like to have an opportunity because I think that we had a number of comments. I think it wasn't just me. I remember that you had a number of comments last year on the draft.
I'm just worried right now. We've got it, you know, and we have being picked up from the city next Thursday, right?
Yeah, that's a hard deadline.
And so it's like.
Well, we've got, we have a lot of questions already with answers to them. So I think some of it is if we can get those all in one document, John, and if a couple folks, and I'm happy to do this Friday for a short period of time.
Oh yeah, it could be, some of the questions might be on the back of a napkin at this point, but we'll.
If we can get all the questions consolidated with what we have, because there's several documents, I think.
Yes.
So let me do this. I'll put out as much as I can with kind of our kind of ongoing questions that we've had, and then you can add to them, or you can kind of weigh in on ones that you feel are really important that need to be in the book.
Okay.
So.
And why don't you, if you can let us know maybe tomorrow, I know we're together tomorrow evening, if you feel that you need a couple of people to be available Friday.
Okay.
Then we'll try to make that happen.
That'd be great, thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up, John.
One item that I don't remember if we've had it in there before, and I'd really like, if it's possible, and I don't understand if it's possible or not, but I'll ask, is what the income tax rate would be for the income sensitized people. In the past, I thought that wasn't something that could be readily calculated, but that's not necessarily my understanding from the past week and all these various meetings I've been in and such.
There's a table we plug in
I know you.
I think
like this means $100 because but if,
No, no.
if we could plug in the percentage, I just don't remember that we've had.
Page
the
14 of the
projected.
budget book from last year
We do
is
have-
this form from the state. We have that all ready to go except for
Okay.
tonight's actions. Yeah.
Okay, so it has been in there.
Yes.
I just-
Yes.
We've also in the past, although this has been, we've had an interactive place where we could do that too, but that was harder. We didn't have the data from the state in order to be able to do that until later.
That's what I remember, as an interactive, that's like a site on the district website, yeah.
But-
The state releases those
Just-
tables around the 25th of February.
Right.
Yeah.
So some of those may have to be kind of developed as we go. So we hear you on the income sensitivity piece, and again, some of the questions are good from the previous.
Okay. Other announcements?
Yep.
Or any announcement?
Yeah, sorry. So, South Burlington School District Student Art Show at Barnes & Noble, celebrating National Mentoring Month. The artwork will be there for the entire month, so I encourage you to stop by. And there's a reception on Friday, January 24th from 5 to 6. Again, can stop by and see the artwork. Reminder that January 20th is Martin Luther King holiday. There's no school, although there are some events that are going on through PACT. We do have some students coming down from the high school and will be participating. We're bringing down actually our students that are part of that from the islands with some transportation to make sure they can get there. February 5th, early dismissal at the elementary schools for teacher in-service. And again, no lunch will be served. Again, I think that's an important thing for folks to note. Also, February 5th is a school board meeting, and that's been changed from the Chamberlain back here to the middle school as a result of the family night and book fair at Chamberlain, although it probably would be fun for you folks to be there, but they need all that space, so won't work. And then Channel 17 school board budget presentation and candidate forum is on for the February 20th, 5:25. So we're just getting those dates in there, but these are dates where we present the budget along with the city, and then candidate forum usually is just after, I think, or just before, I forget. So just kind of letting you know that. We'll have more.
Delina wanted you to tell everybody that the steering committee meeting has been confirmed on the 22nd for 6 o'clock. So I think we're either going to have to make our executive session at 5 or agree to do it afterward.
Okay.
Yeah, so it will definitely be after, and, it's an hour, so we're going to work with the city to make sure we can be, fairly succinct.
The 22nd?
Correct.
Yeah.
22nd
Okay.
is steering committee. It was on there as a earlier announced date, so we'll need to make sure our times are pretty good, and it will be here in this location because we have a board meeting that follows. That's all I have.
And do I see that is that the communication
Yep,
schedule? Is
actually,
that for?
That's for you guys, just tell you how busy you'll be in the next coming period of time. So these are just calendars, and we can send them to you electronically as well. Sorry. And again, this is a little bit of the same that I told the group earlier, and I could have handed them out to you earlier, but you can see on here that this is just for your information. I'm not expecting you to go to the PTO meetings at the respective schools, but that I have those planned in there, and I'm doing them both kind of budget and fifth grade. And again, a lot of those fifth grade conversations will happen before, but they're happening at, I'm trying to make sure that I get to all of those locations. There's other things in here around just different activities that are going on student play, family fun night, budget presentation at different locations. And again, I'm happy to have you attend or come to any one of those if you so desire.
And
again,
this is
I won't read
on
all
our
of them.
meeting agenda next week,
Yeah.
correct? The communication plan.
But
So
I did want to highlight just again, for the board, I know fifth grade is a topic for folks, and trying to get out the information and get to the folks is certainly on the forefront here, so.
Okay.
All right, thanks for.
all right. Any other announcements from the board? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in
Thank you.
favor? We're adjourned. Thank you.